Good evening. A couple quick updates. First, let me apologize for forgetting the gospel book as I was walking in. I love that song, and they were singing it so nicely that I just got overwhelmed. So we had to go catch up. Secondly, you might notice, as Father Tony said, I'm sporting a new hairdo. The treatments that I have for the lymphoma I'm dealing with are going well. I feel amazingly well. God has blessed me every single day so far. One of the greatest blessings is the support that I've received from this community. Your prayers are the best medicine that you can offer me, and I thank you for that. Over the last 2 summers, Joanne and I have had the opportunity to go on a mission trip to Guatemala with the youth ministry group. And we had go with an organization called Hearts in Motion, who's been working there for over 30 years. Their founder, Miss Karen, she has a real long last name, so we're going to stick with Miss Karen, is one of my new heroes because she sees with the eyes of Christ. The people she sees and works with have very little by worldly standards. They're poor, many of them disabled, and easily discarded by society, but not by Karen, because she sees them as children of a loving God and is always asking, what could we do to help them have a meaningful role in this community? So imagines the possibilities, and she brings things to life. They organize 3 medical missions a year. She's built 2 preschools, a nutrition center that serves or saves malnourished people. They come in a bag of bones, and 6 months later, she sends them back home healthy after feeding them for 6 months. She's built 40 houses for people living in makeshift shacks, and she's organized training and equipment for almost every fire brigade in Guatemala. She builds community wherever she goes. We thrive when we're connected. She allowed us to experience some of the joy of those connections when we were on that trip. Jesus came to the Sea of Galilee, and the people brought him a deaf man with a speech impediment. It's not unusual for someone deaf from birth to have a speech impediment because they can't hear, so they can learn to talk. In his day, those with disabilities were frequently sent off, left to beg for a meager existence. Even worse, many people judged you to have sinned because why would God give such a disability to anyone if they weren't a sinner? Obviously, made to be outcast in the society. Now, it's been 2,000 years since Jesus walked on this earth, and while our understanding of disabilities has grown greatly over that time, the end result is frequently the same. Most of us, myself included, hang out with people who look like us and agree with us and can run the way we like to run. It's easy to turn a blind eye on those who are struggling. Sometimes it's uncomfortable to serve people with disabilities or addictions or mental illness. Listen to the words used to describe some of our brothers and sisters in need: trafficked, poor, lazy, immigrant, undocumented, unwed, indigent, illegal, homeless. Well, those don't sound like words that are drawing people in. They're sounding like words that cast people apart. Through a series of circumstances, some they may have chosen, but many they didn't choose, they become outcasts, disconnected from our communities. We thrive when we're connected. God's reign is about union and communion, which means it's also about mercy and forgiveness and solidarity, calling us to lead lives of love and patience and service. That's the sum and the substance of Jesus' teaching, because we're all in this together, and we all need each other to stay connected. St. James tells us, show no partiality. No matter the circumstance, let's not forget that they, like us, are beloved children of God. On another phrase that comes to mind when I think of this, my mom used to always say, there but for the grace of God, go I. Catholic social teaching has a foundational cornerstone, the dignity and the worth of every human person. None of us should be defined by the worst thing we've done or the dire circumstances we have endured. None of us is disposable. No one should feel that their lives matter less than anyone else's. All of our lives matter a great deal. The U.S. bishops remind us we're called to look out for the common good. That means everybody, where all people have a seat at the table. We thrive when we're connected, when sins are forgiven and grudges removed. Now, Jesus could have easily walked on past the deaf-mute. Many of his disciples in other parts of the gospel encourage him. Come on, we got places to go. You know, I'm sure he had important things to do. But to Jesus, being in relationship, removing barriers, healing and restoring life, that was the important thing. So he stopped. He went out of his way to connect with those in need, those on the margins. He ate with sinners and tax collectors. He touched people believed to be unclean. He sought justice for the oppressed and was committed to setting captives free. Jesus offers liberation from our challenges, from the things that are keeping us from being connected, reconnecting us so that all of us can live and to love at the highest level. If we thrive when we're connected, it's alarming to me that the Surgeon General has issued an advisory noting that one of the biggest public health crises in our country is loneliness, isolation, and lack of connection. Some blame it on COVID, and I'm sure that's part of it, but it's bigger than that. Because even before the pandemic, nearly half the adults had reported experiencing measurable levels of loneliness and depression. Nearly half. The health consequences are real. 29% increased risk of heart disease, 32% increased risk of stroke, and a 50% increase of developing dementia in older adults. And as I get older, I think about that more than I used to when I was young. You know, the numbers aren't from some anonymous population. They're from right in our families, from our friends and neighbors in our community. Now, how can this be with technology that's been built to enhance social connection? Well, while technology has so many advantages, it can also come with some unintended consequences. One of those may be more shallow connections at the expense of the deep personal relationships that give richness to life. We could simply walk on by. Many of us have a large network, and we all have important things to do. But Jesus would frequently stop because, as we saw in today's gospel, building a relationship, reconnecting a broken relationship was most important to him. So since we've been tasked to bring God's love into the world as Christians, maybe strengthening relationships should be important to us as well. Change happens when we decide to act. Starts with prayer. Let's ask God to walk with us and, in the case of challenging connections, to give us the mindset and the words to build bridges to a brighter future. It happens one small step at a time. Maybe find an aunt or an uncle that doesn't have somebody to come by very often and go see them. Or maybe you've said to a friend for years, let's get together for dinner. Well, pick up the phone, call and make a reservation. Twice a month, maybe nurture a relationship by saying, I'm going to put a coffee catch-up in my calendar. I'm drinking coffee most every day. I'm going to get together with a friend and talk about what's going on in their life. And in the case of an estranged relationship, maybe it's a simple note saying that you're thinking of them and you're hoping they're well. Because sometimes it's not about being right. That may have caused the relationship to strain. It's more about showing that we care. All of those start with a commitment to quality time. Now, it may seem a bit uncomfortable to start, but like many things, it gets easier with practice. Jesus wants us to be all one in Christ. And one thing I know, when you spend quality time with a friend, they feel special. And that's a good start. Miss Karen from Hearts in Motion fell in love with the people in Guatemala. She's dedicated over 30 years of quality time to meeting their needs. And over the course of building many relationships, she's adopted 12 Guatemalan children to go with her 2 biological children. many of whom are now working with her in the ministry. And to show the power of connection, she's had 23 babies named after her by moms whose family that she served. We met some of the Karens on our trip last year. And by the way, John O'Brien is organizing an adult mission trip to Guatemala with Hearts in Motion next January. If you're interested, there are spaces available. Remember, life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. We thrive when we're connected. Who needs your love today?